Now then, I'll bring in Simon Marks, who is LBC's Washington correspondent and has been watching and listening to the events intently over the past 24 hours. Simon, what are your initial comments on what we've seen in the White House and at the Oval Office? Morning to you.
Good morning to you, Richard. Good evening from here at the end of what has been a very long day that ends, I think, with as many questions unanswered as were unanswered when the sun rose this morning and the European leaders and Volodymyr Zelensky were preparing to enter the White House. I mean, one thing we can say incontrovertibly is that Volodymyr Zelensky didn't get shouted at least not on camera, by Donald Trump. And so that's a result. That's a win.
Yes.
And that is one of the reasons, let's be honest, why Sir Keir Starmer, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the French President Emmanuel Macron, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and all the rest raced to Washington, D.C. on Sunday and into Monday because they wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to be in for another drubbing at the hands of Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. Beyond that, it is hard to see exactly what has been achieved here. As you know, President Trump raced to social media to say that he had promised that security guarantees for Ukraine that will be provided by the Europeans will be done so, he says, with coordination with the United States. No one here in Washington can tell you what that phrase means. And if the European leaders came away with any more specificity about it, they are not able to indicate what kind of guarantees they were provided by the United States about the security guarantees. But the headline-grabbing announcement that Donald Trump made about the possible bilateral one-on-one meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky, that he says that he brokered with Vladimir Putin during a phone call that was so pressing he decided to interrupt his meeting with European leaders in order to make it. They, of course, were not allowed to be in the room to eavesdrop on the call while it was taking place. Well, the Kremlin itself is pouring buckets of cold water on that claim by Donald Trump. Yuri Ushakov, a top Putin aide who was actually in the room in Alaska on Friday with Vladimir Putin when he met Donald Trump for that summit meeting, is saying that actually what the two leaders agreed, this is from the Kremlin's viewpoint, is that they're going to beef up lower level negotiations between Russia and Ukraine that have taken place on and off. I mean, they keep stalling every now and again. They sputter back into life. The Kremlin says they've agreed to beef up those lower level negotiations, but there was absolutely no indication coming from Yuri Ushakov that Vladimir Putin thinks that he is personally going to participate in them. So I think you can probably kick that into the long grass. So does the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He said he was very sceptical that there's going to be a meeting between Putin and Zelensky anytime soon. President Macron, briefing reporters here, has questioned Donald Trump's claim that Vladimir Putin truly wants peace. He told reporters, "I am not convinced that President Putin wants peace. His ultimate goal is to gain as much territory as he can to weaken Ukraine." And he said that security guarantees and the debate about them will require not a bilateral summit between Putin and Zelensky, nor a trilateral summit between Putin and Zelensky brokered by Donald Trump, but a quadrilateral summit. He was the man at the table today saying to President Trump, "You've got to give the Europeans a seat at the table for these talks because we're going to be the ones providing the security guarantees." That also appears to have fallen on deaf ears today.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think if Volodymyr Zelensky were around a table with Mr. Putin, with Mr. Trump, he would feel entirely bullied into submission, rather in the way that he was in the Oval Office by J.D. Vance and the President. I think it would be a far more useful, mollifying filter to have the likes of Macron or Merz or even Starmer around that table if you had Putin together with either Trump or Zelensky. And we talked a little bit more about the security arrangements. Almost sort of, it seems like an almost sort of NATO light, doesn't it? This idea that a group of European nations, including perhaps America, would contractually come to the rescue of Ukraine if Russia were to invade again. again, hazy information, and it doesn't sound too credible.
No, absolutely. And when you talk about those security guarantees and the claims that Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy, was making over the weekend that Donald Trump echoed today, that there was, in fact, some huge breakthrough in the Alaska summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, all appearances to the contrary notwithstanding. They claim that Vladimir Putin agreed to what Steve Witkoff tortuously described on American television on Sunday as effectively offering Article 5-like language to cover security guarantees. Now, even while Donald Trump was sitting there at the White House today saying that that had been a breakthrough, the Kremlin was putting out a statement also pouring cold water on that and saying there are no circumstances in which they are going to be prepared to allow any kind of Article 5-like operation, certainly no NATO troops on Ukrainian soil enforcing security guarantees. And they appeared to blame the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, for foisting that idea on Donald Trump. So, again, Vladimir Putin is playing the long game here, and he is playing the game of dragging Donald Trump ever closer into his orbit, which raises huge questions for the European leaders and Volodymyr Zelensky, which is why they raced here today, trying to pull Trump back from Putin's orbit. And it is not clear that that their mission succeeded. Now, Chancellor Merz said tonight that the outcome of these talks had exceeded expectations, which sounds like a good thing, except it's perfectly possible that expectations at breakfast time this morning were so abysmally low that simply by dint of the fact that Vladimir Putin didn't get shouted at and thrown out of the White House, the talks exceeded expectations.
Just finally, there is, we understand, a dinner tonight, which I'm sure the White House staff are delighted about. They'll be hoping that there isn't a food fight doesn't break out potentially as well if Mr. Trump throws his toys out the pram. I mean, is there likely to be any further news in the morning in America? Will there be any more lines coming out of this, or is that more or less this stage over now?
Well, I think we might be over for the evening. It did occur to me earlier that I would have paid good money to see the face of the White House chef when news was suddenly announced that actually this has now gone on for so long they're going to be staying for dinner. I mean, imagine discovering that you were suddenly going to have to cater dinner for the largest number of European leaders ever simultaneously to be present in the White House. And remember,
there is a McDonald's nearby then.
I know, I was thinking, where are they going to get the takeout from? I am absolutely sure that we will hear more from Donald Trump on his social media feed. If not later tonight, then certainly in the morning. I think he's going to continue trying to indicate that all of this has been a tremendous achievement on his part. There is one other strain in all of this, Richard, that's worth noting, which is Donald Trump's insistence that he's not interested in brokering a ceasefire before the long-term peace negotiations. There was a big disagreement about that between him and Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, and other European leaders who say you can't make Volodymyr Zelensky engage in peace negotiations at a time when his country is still coming under Russian attack. And Donald Trump just doesn't want to hear it and thinks there's no need for a ceasefire.
Simon, very good to hear from you this morning or this evening, depending on where you are. Simon Marks there, LBC's Washington correspondent.